Right then, the wait is over. We were just eagerly curious. The suspense was building. What will be the rules ahead of the big auction for the IPL? Well, the BCCI has announced it and they've given us plenty to break down and unpack. So we're going to do that on this very special edition of Time Out here on our network. Might I welcome the crew to help me because this is going to take some serious uh, analysis and breaking down, and we've all got to wrap our heads collectively. My colleagues are here, Nagraj Kolhapuri, Yash Jha, and Dustin Selgado, to make sure I don't miss anything. And we've got all the wisdom of Tom Moody, who might be pretty happy that he's not on any of the owners' calls right now, because there'll be a lot of questions. Tom, firstly, let me welcome you. You've had a lovely few months. You've won the 100. Congratulations for that. Shall we get down to business now?
Let's get down to business. Yeah, that's already happened, and thank you for that. It was a great tournament in the UK, but as you said, very much looking forward to dissecting this because it wouldn't have been an easy job to please 10 franchise owners.
How have they actually gone to the best degree, the IPL Governing Council, to keep everyone happy? Let's just break down what's happening for the first time. 6 retentions, any combination of overseas and Indian, any combination of RTMs and retains. The RTM is back, but it comes with a very significant twist. We'll come to that in a moment. And as far as the restrictions go, no more than 5 capped players and no more than two uncapped players as your 6 retainees. And let me also add that there is a new definition to the uncapped player, which we'll also come to in a bit. But looking at what you've seen, Nagraj has broken the story and it's on ESPNcricinfo. But Tom, what's the most significant point for you that you think is what the IPL franchises right now are first discussing now that the rules are out?
Well, I think that the first thing that really stood out for me was the fact that you could retain up to 5 capped players from both either Indian or overseas. And I think that is a very clever play, because what it's done is it's enabled a number of different franchises to be able to have the flexibility to be able to either look after and protect their Indian talent, or let's use Sunrisers Hyderabad, for example. It enables them to potentially retain their very strong overseas unit.
Okay, let's go around the room and just figure what for us stands out as the biggest challenge or the biggest question that will be posed to the franchises. Nagraj, you've spoken to a number of the franchises. Tom talks about the challenge of trying to keep as many of them happy. Do you think with the various rules that we've mentioned that this has actually made most franchises, given most franchises what they want?
Yeah, they made a wish and most of their wishes have come true. Now the challenge set by IPL is quite interesting and will make the auction exercise one of the best, probably, if they think wisely, the franchises, that is. The key challenge, as Tom already outlined, is you get to pick 5 cap players regardless of whether they are overseas or this. This is exactly what most franchises, especially the likes of Mumbai, KKR, or even Sunrisers, wanted. So, and they have also said that, you can also take the RTMs if you want to retain these players. But that significant twist, as in your words, as you mentioned, is that for the RTM, which we will break later, has from the little quick chats I've had with a couple of franchises, they say that this is what has put us the question. The big question for them is, do I want to retain the player or risk him in the auction, even if I have the RTM, only because that new RTM rule allows the rival bidder to up the bid, and then that can kind of put confuse or play, what do you say, play around with my auction strategy. So that's the biggest risk they are facing now. That's what I think.
So the franchises have quite a few things they'll need to factor before they go into the auction. Normally it's a straightforward rule with the RTM, and it also affects what the value of the player is. Now there's that new rule. Let me just summarize where I think a lot of the franchises have got their main wish, and Yash, Dustin, add on. The new definition of the uncapped player, you can certainly see how that benefits CSK. That would have been top on their priority list because they can retain MS Dhoni for 4 crore. There are a few other names as well, but this is perhaps the franchise that will be the happiest with that rule. 6 retentions is a lot of retentions. Normally it's 4, and therefore teams like MI, KKR, possibly SRH would all be happy that they can keep as many as 6 players, even though it'll cost them quite a bit. The no restriction on overseas players that Tom mentions, something that the Sunrisers certainly would like, and the flexibility of having RTMs and retentions in equal number if you want, or whatever combination. That's the kind of thing that I think Punjab, Delhi, and a few other franchises that aren't quite sure of what the value of their players would be, they'd be taking that as well. I think we can jump straight to the RTM rule because this is very significant, and how this plays into whether you would want to retain a player or send him into the auction with the risk of that new rule for the RTM. Let's break the new rule down, Yash.
Yeah, so essentially, as opposed to previous RTM cycles, and the RTM card hasn't existed for some time, the last mega auction did not have the option available. But if you go back to 2014 and 2018, when the RTM card was there to be exercised, it's you see a flat out bid, you have a winning bid, and then the team which owned the player in the season before that can simply raise the card and make the player theirs. But
Right.
now, even after the team in question, so let's say if an Arshdeep Singh for Punjab Kings, if Punjab choose not to retain him, is at the auction, someone else gets what you call the winning bid. If Punjab raise the RTM card, that team which has played the last bid will still get a chance to increase their bid and go beyond that RTM card. So that is what changes the dynamics.
And that increase can be any amount. So let's say, for example, they send
Yes.
Arshdeep in, the LSG and KKR are bidding for Arshdeep Singh, and they've got to about 12 crore. You ask Punjab, do you want to retain him? They say yes. You want to play the RTM? Yes. It goes back to the winning bid. Let's say it's with KKR, and they can make that 12, 14, 18, whatever they
Correct.
want, Nagraj.
Yes, I mean there is a gray area. Exactly, what we don't know about is it just a one-time price, like one bid will be offered, or would it be escalate in steps as per the auction exercise? I believe it should be, from reading the rules, even if they're not completely definitive in their wording. I feel it should be just one bid.
Yeah, I
They
think
would be
it
offered
certainly
one
will.
bid.
Otherwise it will
That
can
makes
go-
more sense. Yeah, and also it will be sticking to auction purse. So within the auction purse, so you can't just kind of go and have a silent tiebreaker. If you remember, used to be the case in
Yes.
the past. But this would be just
one
one
bid
bid.
for the team that one winning bid, or one last bid by the team that won the original bid, and to compete with the home team before they double confirm, if I can use that term now, their RTM. Tom, is this a good rule?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent rule. It's going to be intriguing to see whether teams up their bid, because more often than not, having been in that environment where you've bidded for a player, probably 9 times out of 10, you've maxed out on your bid anyway with your own strategy. And to be thrown another challenge to up it by another crore or whatever it may be is only going to continue to stretch your budget and make it difficult for you down the line to recruit the balance of the squad that you're looking for. So I really cannot see too many teams going above and beyond too much. If they're dead set on that player, they might go maybe 1, maximum 2 crore up to make sure they secure that player, because it may be the final piece to their puzzle. But it's going to be intriguing to see how that plays out.
I think the thing that strikes me is this is a rule that's in the interest of a player. Many times the bids never went high because you almost knew then that the RTM is going to come in. So what's the point? But here you're giving the chance for a player to get perhaps fair value.
Yeah, there's a really good example that I was involved with Shikhar Dhawan. We picked Shikhar was the first player to come out of the auction. I think it was 2 cycles ago. And we picked him up for around about, I think, 5.5 crore, which is way below what you'd expect a Shikhar Dhawan to command in that auction. We were over the moon. We retained a player that's been with us for a long time. We retained a high-quality Indian cap player, but he was clearly underpaid. And that then led to a little bit of uncertainty and restlessness with him being at the Sunrisers, and therefore we ended up trading him to Delhi Capitals because there was no sort of room for us to extend his payment beyond what the auction retention was.
Yeah,
And that's, I think, what BCCI, or rather IPL, decided when they were talking in the intervening 2 months since meeting. What they wanted was the player should get as much benefit as monetary benefit as possible, because the players have expressed their disgruntlement about not being the market price not determining when the in the past when they have been retained for low price. Because I think the problem then was, especially the last two players retained, whatever the number 4 or 5, the retention amounts were very low, and they believed that they deserved more. So now the IPL is saying, okay, fine, let not just the market determine the price, but we are also allowing you to earn a little bit more by giving the final bidder another opportunity to raise the bid.
I'm going to come back to this point you made when I discussed the uncapped player who's been retired for 5 years, whether he's getting a fair market price when he goes into the auction. But we'll put that in storage for some time. Yash, there was one more example I think you wanted to bring out.
Yes. So you guys have brought out what this means for the players, but I want to ask Tom around the team dynamic with this, around the RTMs with this change, because, and it's curious that you brought up 2018, Tom, because I was digging through your mega auction cycles, and 2018 is an interesting case study where your Sunrisers retained 2 players, allowed yourselves 3 RTM cards, and were able to exercise all 3 at the auction. Dhawan, as you pointed out, at 5.2. Rashid Khan, who went into the auction that time, you got him at an RTM for 9 crore, and then I think you got Deepak Hooda at 3.6. So clearly there was a strategy but is that strategy not as watertight with this change in RTM rules from a team's perspective?
I think, to be honest with you, I think the RTM is linked to the actual the downscaling of the payments. A lot of teams are going to be thinking long and hard about how much do they retain beyond 3 players, because as it stands at the moment, my understanding, the first retention is 18 crore, the second is 14 crore, the third is 11 crore. And then if you're retaining that 4th person, that jumps back up to 18. So to me, that is going to be the talking point on the agenda, on the first thing on the agenda when every team gets together and starts their strategy planning, is that do we go beyond 3 retentions because we've got the ability to right to match the last 3, because that's a hell of a hit to retain the 4th person to jump up to 18 crore. And that's where this right to match could be very, very interesting, how that plays out.
So I'm trying to understand why they've gone this way. Let's put those numbers up. We had them a little while back for you. So 18, 14, 11, and then 18, 14 again. So you're spending 75 crore out of your purse of 120 for 5 players. Let's leave the uncapped player out of this for now. But 75 crore, normally it went chronologically in descending order, where the 4th player would be paid less and the 5th player less. So you felt like you retained a core at a sizable value. Now suddenly you're looking at a Tilak Verma who might be the 4th choice retention, but is he worth paying that much more for? And you could have a similar story for Travis Head or Heinrich Klaassen for the Sunrisers, or Abhishek Sharma. So that's the big one. Why is this been the number this time, Nagaraj?
So yes, while the IPL has told the franchises that you've got what you wanted, we give you what you wanted, but at the same time, IPL has cunningly got what they wanted also. They wanted to kind of have a balance when they go for an auction, which is an exercise, which is an event by itself, most watched, etc., and all that followed. So they wanted quality talent to come into the auction, so the auction exercise becomes that much more challenging for the franchise. So what they said was like, right, first 3, 18, 14, 11, 43 crores. The next 2, not so straightforward. If like you already explained, we have already spoken about it, and broadly, it eats into your purse. Do you want to? Certain franchises will want to still go for 75 crores and retain the best 5 players. Everyone knows it's no brainer that someone like MI will think about that, because they have the big name players. MI and KKR are the top 2 teams which are likely to look at that. But I would be very much interested in what Venki Mysore does. This is something that he would like, this kind of an exercise. So MI would be someone like who would be looking at this. But 75 crores and then you want to build 15 more players and 45 crores. It's possible, but is it really worth that kind of? I don't know, from a head coach point of view, Tom can put his hat on and say that, is it worth it? Can I get 15 good quality players that can win an IPL?
Well, the way I look at it is to secure the 4th and 5th player, that's going to cost me 32 crore.
Yes.
I then look at that total amount and look at those 2 players that I potentially would like to retain, and have to make a judgment call on whether for that budget of 32, I'm still going to be able to get those two players out of the auction. Forgetting that one's going to get 18 and 14, because you might find that in the auction, on the auction day, the one that you thought was going to be cheaper might be more expensive than the other one. So therefore, to me, that's where a lot of the think tank will be getting their head around the fact that, okay, do we commit the 32 crore now up front before the auction, so we have the security of locking those players in, or do we let it run and play its course and hope that we either get around 32, and it doesn't matter what the pricing is for those two players, but we want those two players, or we might get lucky and get them at a discount at 25 crore.
Yeah, so this we will do more in detail once I think it'll be fun to do this with team by team. Look at it and see, are you going to pay that 32 crore that Tom mentioned? So we'll come to that. And if you have any questions, just send it through on our social feed as well. We're trying to do the most exhaustive analysis here of these fascinating rules. Dustin was given the job of listening to the first 15 minutes and then firing the kind of questions that only Dustin can. Dustin, what's on your mind?
No, pretty much everything in line with what has been discussed so far, that I think a lot of teams are only going to retain 3 players. What you had at the last auction in 2022 was you had that 6 crore bracket, which was the lowest bracket. And there were a lot of players who were perhaps undervalued at that bracket, right? You had Ruturaj Gaikwad, Kieron Pollard, these kinds of players went for this 6 crore.
Yeah, Sunil Narayan was one of those,
Yeah, so now you can't do that anymore. And I like the fact that actually what's kind of replaced that bracket is the uncapped bracket now, because you have this 4 crore bracket. And so you can get a 4th player who's an uncapped player. I think it actually incentivizes franchises to retain some of their uncapped players and maybe let some of the capped players go back into the auction. And then they can consider whether they want to go for right to match cards for those players. So I think a lot of franchises might end up going with, say, 3 retentions and maybe 1 uncapped, and then leave 2 for the right to match for the auction. That's a combination I think a few teams might go with.
Before I move on, I think there are a couple of things here. Can we ask a general question here, Tom, at this point, on whether wiser strategy at this big auction with all these new dynamics is going to be retain your core best you can and don't gamble on the RTMs, or do you sense it's the other way around here, where perhaps release your core and play with the RTMs there? Is there a one size fits all rule for this auction?
No, I think every team's going to be very different in what their requirements are, and they've got players at different cycles of their careers. We've got to realise that this retention we're retaining a player for 3 years as well. That's the intention anyway. So there's a few players that have been iconic players in the IPL and globally for many, many years, but probably they're on their decline with regards to their career. So do you want to be, sacrificing an 18 or a 14 crore slot for a player that you potentially may only get a season out of the 3 seasons in this cycle? That's going to be the challenge. But I think what will be very, very prevalent is the retention of your Indian core, because there's no sort of magic recipe to winning IPLs. That you look at the successful sides, and the 2 standout sides, the Mumbai Indians and Chennai Super Kings. What they have done well is they've kept a very strong, robust Indian core, and that's why they've been successful and been consistent. So therefore, I think that's going to be pretty much high on the agenda for most of the franchises. There's a couple of outliers that don't have that same balance of Indian cap players as others.
Okay, can I just quickly point out one thing? I wanted a question for Yash, actually, because I think he's dug out numbers and auctions. I didn't get the time last night. What is the maximum purse in 2017 franchises went? Was there a franchise that went with like the maximum purse? Because I'm looking at whether a franchise here would think, should I go in with 6 retentions, RTMs, and 1 full purse? Is that a high-risk strategy?
So the thing with 2017 going into the 2018 mega auction is that you had a maximum of 3 retentions. And CSK and MI were part of the teams who did take all 3. At that point, it was, 33 crore that you needed to shell out. out of a purse of 80 crore. And which is why actually, Tom, when you bring up CSKMI, if you look at the 4 mega auction cycles we've seen, those are the only 2 teams who have chosen to retain the maximum possible players in every mega auction cycle. But what intrigues me is the difference in the percentage you now have to shell out. Now, with that
Yes.
figure reaching 75, 79 crore, it means that you have to shell out nearly 2/3 of your purse to avail the maximum retentions. Whereas in the past, that figure has been around 45 to 50%. How much of a difference does that make to the strategy of wanting to retain your core?
I'll just
And just
add
to
one
answer,
thing to the same
sorry, just to
question.
answer-
Yeah, sorry, Dustin, go on.
No, just to answer Nagaraj's question, in 2018, none of the franchises went in with no retentions, but Kings 11 and DC, I believe, had one each. So they had only retained one player each, and then
Yeah.
they had all the rest of their purse available, and they had the RTM cards.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's what I was saying. The RTM cards, there were 3 RTM cards. Correct me if I'm wrong. At that point,
Yeah. You had-
2017. That's what I was wondering, because
Yeah,
that
you
was the
could-
last time.
So I
When
think
our team
also
was
just to carry on from this point, before we throw the sort of overall question to Tom, I think it's also important that the franchises have some idea of what the auction looks like with regards to the sets. It's a 2-day auction. So when we're talking about 75 crore for 5 players, 2/3 of your purse, you're making those judgment calls, aren't you, Tom, on what a player might be worth at a big auction. But that calculation is hard to make before you actually know how the auction is going to play out. Now, will they have that information before they have to release their list of retainees is the other big challenge.
Yeah, so your point is, will you know who else is left on the table after you've made your announcement of your retentions?
I go with the things like the marquee set, the first set, who's included in it, who's not in it. Then you've made a calculation, all right, what is this player worth? So I think that's going to further complicate their matters, or do you think it's wise for them to actually know that in advance?
I think it's going to make it very difficult. And I think also this extended sort of number of right to matches is also throwing a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons, where anything's possible. You just don't know in that environment what someone's desperate need is to complete the set of their combination. Most teams are building an 11, even though they're building a squad of 20 plus. Most people, their focus will be very much on those 11 players. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they've also kept the impact player rule.
12.
Yes,
I was about to say maybe the 12.
So therefore, that's going to change the dynamics of this auction as well, because every team knows about this impact player rule, how that affects the balance of their side, what are their real needs. So therefore, the focus, in my view, won't be so much down the barrel to those unique all-rounders that give you balance, because you're already given that sort of get-out clause with a 12th man.
All right, we're going to move forward and try and do each team. But before that, the other big rule that's coming through on our comments as well on YouTube Live. Let's talk about the uncapped rule. Nagaraj, correct me if I'm wrong. We might think this is being done only for Dhoni now, which would be perception. But I believe this rule was in place for several years. Earlier in the IPL, it just never really was called into action, that a player who's been retired or not played international cricket for 5 years is deemed to be uncapped. So this is not a new rule, but an old rule being brought back.
Yeah, quite a sensitive topic, so I'm better.
Why? I personally felt why not just retain Dhoni? You can easily retain him or right to match him. I don't
exactly
understand.
what the franchise is saying, that if I want to retain Dhoni, I can retain Dhoni at any price because he deserves that. It's just about whether he wants to come back to the franchise. But then, come on, it's business, and business in the sense of getting the best squad. And Dhoni himself has said in the past that, look, I don't want to be paid because of the highest retention slab, etc. But the franchise says, no, we can't do without you. So this rule, somehow, whoever thought about it is very smart and has made
I'm
the
just saying,
IPL
whatever this is deprived of us, one of the great spectacles that we could have seen, which is Dhoni entering the auction, at this stage.
No, that is not possible. Yeah, I don't think that would break.
CSK's desire to have this was, we don't want him to go into the auction. We want to retain him, and we also don't want to pay even 11 crore, right? That's what I don't get about this. They could have easily just
they would pay 11 crore, but they don't want to take a hit in the purse. So simple as that. It's just that The other bit is the impact player, which is attached to that. I think Dhoni, some point, correct me if I'm wrong, someone told me, I have not read that. Apparently, he said that I'm there because of the impact player, something on those lines. Does anyone recollect that? So that impact player is very important. So Dhoni is also there because he wants to play, because he thinks that the impact player allows him to do the role in whatever limited capacity as leader and lower order batter, a finisher, however you describe it as. So, and CSK feels that even if I pay 4 crore, whatever the other amount, money doesn't matter here for him. For them, it's more importantly.
I think it came through. It came through in conversation. I don't know if it was Dhoni himself who said it or whether he mentioned it in one of his player interviews during the tournament, that the impact players allowed for his role to be what it was in the last year. Now, I'm just saying,
I'm just going to finish that point quickly,
Yes.
because someone highlighted this, another player I was talking to, and he highlighted that this rule has been there, which it was not known widely to anybody, maybe probably even the franchises themselves. And it might have been around 5-7 years ago that one of the players, I think it was Sudeep Tyagi, I was told, former fast bowler, who had not played for 5 years or something, and he came back into the auction as in the uncapped category. So some players have probably entered as uncapped, having been capped previously. So we don't know about it definitively, but yeah, this rule clearly will allow.
Only for
and it's
Indian
only for
players.
Indians. Only for Indians. Very,
So
very
Sunil Narayan or with time
No.
of our Duplessis, this will not apply. So that's one thing.
No.
So to simply put it to you, Tom, if you were sitting in the other franchises over here, I mean, do you look at this rule and say, yeah, it's clearly just for Dhoni? Is it a good precedent to set? He does defy a lot of usual trends. Normally, an uncapped player, if he's not played for 5 years, or an international retired player not playing for 5 years, there's not going to be a question of paying big money for him anyway. So this is not going to be applicable for a Sandeep Sharma or a Piyush Chawla or an Amit Mishra, due respect to them. Now, is this a good rule, firstly, if you're looking at it from other than CSK lenses? Because I'm sure they would welcome this rule.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to look at this is remove Dhoni as the example, because he is your extreme example. I think it's a great rule. I think it allows, if you're good enough and you've got longevity, it allows a player to continue to play on the big stage and perform and have some sort of role without them, I suppose, making it difficult with regards to, from a price perspective, to retain those players, because they may be the identity, or in Dhoni's case, he certainly is the identity of CSK. So I don't think that's an issue at all. I think the longer the likes of iconic players like Dhoni can play in the IPL and it can physically, deliver like he has been, it's good for the tournament.
And that's where, Ronak, if you look at the inception of this rule, if you have to think about why it existed in 2008, is because when the IPL was starting, that golden generation of Indian cricket was very close to its retirement. So you had the likes of Anil Kumble and Saurav Ganguly, who had retired by the time the first season ended.
Yeah.
And actually, Ganguly came very close to availing this rule back in the day, because he did play for 4 more seasons after retirement. I'll just add one more thing, which has come up in the comment section a lot, because people are confused by the wording of whether it's retired or last played, which is why they're saying Dhoni announced his retirement on 15th August 2020. So how is he valid? It's not from the date of announcement of retirement. It's from the date that you last played an international, which in Dhoni's case was July 2019.
Yeah. I just had one question, which is why did they restrict it to this 5 years? I would have actually liked to see them open it up and say even anybody who's not on a central contract can be an uncapped player, because then you allow people like Krunal Pandya and Yuzi Chahal, who also are no longer part of the Indian team, and they are not unlikely to be retained for anything more than 11 crores. You could have given them the opportunity to come in at 4 crores, or even some of the younger players like, say, Mayank Yadav or Harshit Rana, who might end up playing just one game before the deadline. They are now going to be counted as capped players. But if you have the rule as if you're not centrally contracted, then you can go into this 4 crore bracket. You would have a lot more players who could then go into that.
But I don't think an uncapped player is someone who's just not currently in the scheme of things. There's nothing that stops a Krunal Pandya from being part of the Indian setup going forward. Chahal has played as recently as last year. I think it would just, I don't see how that would apply, because you're comparing an uncapped player with somebody who's not been capped at all for India. So it's a different category of player. Mayank Yadav is, the kind of Shashank Singh, either young or old. I'm just trying to think with the Dhoni, with this rule for Dhoni, whether this might actually make the IPL more, in terms of this, the value with the big players, the icon players playing? Can we possibly see the likes of a Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma end up being part of the tournament longer as a result of this precedent? And maybe that's a good thing then?
I think it's unlikely, because I think Dhoni is a real outlier. He's such a unique case. There's very few examples you can compare to his situation. Probably Chris Gayle is one from the West Indies, would be certainly one that's in that category. I personally think 5 years is a long time. I would like to see it as a 3-year window. Once a player has played his last international game, I think if you're out of international cricket, or you haven't been considered for to play for India over that 3-year window, you should be given the rite of passage to be able to come in at that 4-crore level.
But Tom, one question about that. Fair, I agree with your point. It also enhances the IPL, the product, because you have these big name players who are not being regularly featuring in international cricket continue to play IPL. The counter to that, and it came from your former, I don't know to say boss or owner, or Kavya Maran. She said, she said that in the IPL meeting, apparently, that this devalues the respect of not Dhoni as such, but the international player gets, if especially an uncapped player gets more amount at an auction than this person.
Yeah, but that's all fine. But at the end of the day, we all have I suppose, a market value, and in sport that is always going to decline. In business, that tends to go the opposite way. It keeps going up and up and up, because your value and experience in whatever business you're in, whether it's, it doesn't matter what business you're in, the more, I suppose, time that you have within that organisation, you become more and more valuable. But as a sports person, your value naturally declines, because your physicality, cannot match what it was when you're in your late 20s and your early 30s. So, I think most cricketers and most sports people recognise that, and are happy to still be recognised by, being selected for one. Whether they get paid less than someone else is all down to performance.
So it's a way that you're saying is also the IPL and the industry needs to mature in that sense to accept this change and not go by just the name.
Yeah, well, there's obviously Dhoni's such a unique case, because you've got your on-field input that he gives you, which is the impact that he has behind the stumps and with the bat in hand, but you have a huge commercial side to Dhoni as well. So
yes,
that's what franchises need to consider as well, is that if Dhoni is retained at 4 crore and he accepts that, you can guarantee he's worth more than 4 crore with what he does off the field for the franchise, let alone how many runs and how many catches he's going to take behind the stumps.
Yeah, I just think it's not like you need to make life any easier for CSK with the success that they have. So I'm hugely surprised. I don't know, Nagaraj can tell me if there were any, if there were veto powers that the franchises had, but this just makes it very sweet. Maybe it's also a sentimental factor here, that because it's Dhoni, there wasn't as much of an objection from the rest of the franchises. So we'll leave it there, but it'll be
there was objection.
I'm sure, but it didn't carry through. So it's happening.
No. Yeah. IPL itself agreed with that. IPL itself, I understand, agreed with Tom's point about the brand. These players bring a lot of brand value to the IPL brand itself, and we have to repay that in some way. And it is also, we are not doing any sort of really fixing here, though some franchises believe that it is being fixed. So that's another thing.
But at the end of the day, it's a difference of 7 crore effectively. If you wanted to retain Dhoni at your lowest possible bracket, you would have accepted it. You would have been retained at 11. So you've done all of this, which I think just, it doesn't add up. But then again, it's great to see Dhoni. If this is what it takes to see him longer, then so be it. Good question from Sanam on our YouTube live. If a team retains just 2 uncapped players, they'll be cut 8 crore and they'll have 112 crore purse. I think that is possible. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's if we read the rules right.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Interesting strategy. Now, maybe this will make more sense as we go to each team. Then we can break down whether there's a case for any franchise to actually retain just 2 uncapped. what's the value of retaining 5 players at 75 crore? As Yash mentioned, that's 2/3 of the purse. So let's go one by one, shall we? Let's bring out our first team and have some fun here. Everyone can take a little time to just remember the squads. Let's start with RCB. And there'll be a big question on the captain himself, Faf du Plessis. Is he worth any of those brackets with the overseas options they have? Ben Maxwell, Will Jacks, Cameron Green, big money trade. And of course, you've got Kohli, Siraj as the front runners as far as Indians go. And in terms of uncapped players, DK is obviously retired, so that's out. But uncapped players,
Dayal,
Vijay Kumar, possibly not a lot of players that sort of scream
Yash
out.
Dayal,
Yash
As
Dayal
Dayal is capped
Yash
now.
Dayal. Is he?
He's not
Isn't
got
Yash
the
Dayal
game yet.
capped?
Yeah, Yash Dayal is uncapped. He's been part of a
He is
squad.
uncapped.
Yeah.
He hasn't played anything.
All right. Is he part of the Bangladesh squad? He's not. Yes, Dayal.
Squad.
For
And
T20
he will
No,
as
not the T20 squad. Not the T20 squad.
But he could also be part of the tests for New Zealand, right?
Yeah, but unless he plays October.
Yeah,
So,
but
by the way, this is a good time to tell the listeners that October 31st is the deadline for teams to submit their list of retentions.
Right.
Just with regards to the capped players and the uncapped, in Dale's example, what's the date of the time that is registered he's capped for
31st
this option?
October.
31st October. 31st October.
Okay.
Yeah. So if he
Yeah.
plays anywhere before now and then, he is capped. So
Yeah.
There are
Two
some
test
delicious
matches.
names over here because you've got Nitish Reddy named in the Bangladesh squad. You've got Mayank Yadav named for it. You've got Harshit Rana. Now there's Yash Dayal who's part of the test setup who will likely be named for the New Zealand series. So if any of them get one cap, that changes your retention from 4 to 11 stroke 14, 18, whatever it may be. So this is going to be fun. Yes,
I think my twist in this particular ruling would be, I just think that it's quite fickle that just if a player plays just the one game leading into maybe the day before the cutoff time, I think that is an unfair or unreasonable sort of situation for any franchise to be in. I'd like to see it, let's use 10 internationals.
Yeah.
If a player's played up to 10 internationals, short of 10 internationals, they still can be in the category of an uncapped player. 10's just a number I plucked out of the sky. But I just think that it just lends to particularly now with particularly India, that's got such great depth of talent. They're spreading the net very wide with 3 formats of the game. A lot of players are going to get caps and therefore only have, 1 or 2 caps on, to their name and then suddenly get put into a different category.
I think that's a great point also. Like Sai Sudarshan would be one of the biggest names on this, who got a cap and didn't even bat in Zimbabwe in T20s. He's played, I think, 2 or 3 ODIs in a series that was a second string series. He's not
Rian Parag.
Parag is, you would think, going to be part of the setup now. By the time the IPL comes along, Parag might very well have had in excess of 10. But I'm saying players who've already been out of it. So whenever the cutoff comes in.
Yeah.
But anyway, So let's break it down.
Is it okay for me to just suddenly hit me one important point that since we are talking about forward thinking and Thomas suggested this and the IPL might very well take this on board. The other next time if they have this kind of an auction, they should also look at, instead of retention slab, they should have a pot. They say that this is the figure and let the franchises kind of allow the franchises to negotiate with the players. You say that there are 6 retentions. That would be a much easier method, I feel, and if the player doesn't want, the player can go to the auction and the franchise can use the RTM. But this way there will be less.
So you're saying instead of saying 18, 14, 11, 18, 14, you say...
say 75 crores for 5 players. Yeah, and then you don't need this uncapped Dhoni thing. They can always tell Dhoni that, okay, fine, whatever number they want to pay, they can pay. And you list that amount, simple as that. Maybe that might be much easier than all this. But anyway, we can move on.
I think it's nice to have clear rules because you don't want to leave too much to the franchise. You never know. So I think clear rules
for the fans to also understand it. So
yeah. Anyway, let's go with the rules that we have been given. Nagaraj, we'll have plenty of time for more rules. There are enough of these. Let's go one team. Let's start with RCB. And I think we can straight slot in Kohli at number 1 at 18 crore, shall we?
Yep.
He got 17 last time.
No, now we're going by the rules. Okay, 18. Now I don't know if there is some wiggle room if you don't retain 4 or 5. If you don't retain the full complement, whether you can make an 18, 14, 11. If that can become 18, 13, 12. I don't know if that can happen. If as long as the number is the same. But we'll for now we'll just follow what we know. 18 crore Kohli number 1. That's set in stone. What about the captain, Faf du Plessis? Is he a retention?
In my view, RCB are a great example of a team that shouldn't be retaining any more than 3 players because of that 4th player and the hit that has on your salary cap. So in my view, RCB should retain 3 players: Kohli, Siraj and Patidar. The 3 Indian players would be the ones I'd lock in, and I'd leave myself open for right to match, whether it be local players or overseas players. Probably the 2 that really stand out for me would be Green and Jacks.
Okay, that's interesting. So Kohli, Siraj and Patidar are Tom's 3 retentions, not the captain Faf du Plessis. So I had Cameron Green as a retention because he can do Faf's job. He's paid big money. He's probably the premium overseas all-rounder. So that was my 4. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Kohli. You guys go ahead.
No, I had the same as Tom, the exact same. Just the 3 Indians, Kohli, Siraj and Patidar, and then leave your RTMs for the rest, because I think somebody like Maxwell, if you leave him in the auction, other teams may not actually bid that much for him. So you'll always have the chance to get him with an RTM. Even players like Jacks and Green, I don't think that either one of them are worth 18 crores. So you can use the RTM.
The question I'd put to Tom then, I think Kohli, Siraj, there's no doubt you won that. But Patidar at 11, if he goes into the auction, is he likely to fetch more than 11?
I think it's every chance. I think we've seen, what he's potentially capable of doing. And I think to secure a relatively young Indian player that's on the rise, I think 11 crore over the 3-year cycle is a very good investment.
Okay, fair enough. Yash, anything more on that?
Yeah, I mean, the only name I'd add is as an uncapped consideration, the namesake. Yash Dayal, if he continues to remain uncapped by the time 31st October comes along, then that I think is a prudent use of 4 crore rupees.
There's a point to be made here that the final call will remain with the player. So it will also be interesting that if a player feels like he can have a really good payday, which Yash Dayal I'm almost certain will have. He's already on more than 4 crore in the last cycle. So you can have the option of vetoing the retention and going into the auction. Right, Nagraj?
Yeah.
Final call with the player. Right.
Yes,
Just
yes.
that out. Okay, so Kohli, Siraj, Patidar look like our top 3 candidates, and the rest to be RTM'd, whether that's Cameron Green or Faf du Plessis. Tom, we did a run-outer recently on whether they should just name Kohli captain. Any thoughts on it very quickly before we move on?
Well, put it this way, I think he's a good fallback option, but I think they should look in the auction for a captain, because I think Faf showed the value of his captaincy, and also just allowing Virat Kohli to be the batter that we know he's capable of being. I think just allows him to unshackle and just be himself with the bat in hand.
All right, one more on Faf. Would you use your RTM for Faf du Plessis? If you go with these 3, you can only use another 2 capped players, which would be Cameron Green, Will Jacks, like you mentioned. So are you happy to just buy back Faf outside of the RTM?
Yeah, I'd definitely look at it. Again, that would be pretty much price dependent. I would, if I was RCB, I'd be looking in the market at captains and the options that they bring to the franchise. You obviously need a relatively dynamic player to fit in at that top order. If the captain is a batter, they might go for a bowling captain. Who knows? They might bid for Pat Cummins, who's been released by Sunrisers. You don't know what the situation's going to be, but I think. But I think you just have a list of 4 or 5 elite captains that you feel that will not only plug the captaincy role but also fit the balance of your side.
Okay, I'm going to come back
one
to
more
this
name.
once we go through one more team, and if they find an
Exactly.
international captain into the auction. I wonder which team that is. It's not Hyderabad, but they've come up now, so let's go to them. Right, this is an interesting one. I think this is the team that is most happy about no issues on overseas versus Indians, because we know there was star cast of overseas players, all instrumental in them making the final. Pat Cummins, Heinrich Klaassen, you think are your top two overseas, and Abhishek Sharma, possibly a Nitish Reddy, who may or may not be capped by the time the deadline comes through, as your premier Indian players. So and Travis Head. Let's mention Travis Head here, of course. So who are our sure shot retainees over here?
I think I'll go all 6 RTMs.
All 6 RTMs. Wow. Okay. Is that a wise call?
I think Tom should give us his retainees first.
Well, let's look at Sunrisers. The reason they had a successful season last year was they were superbly led by Pat Cummins, who also bowled exceptionally well. He sort of, if anything, evolved even further as a T20 bowler.
Yes.
Travis Head was really the lightning shot that Sunrisers, I suppose we're expecting him to perform, but not to perform to the level that he did. He's a genuine match winner. So, and Klaassen, we know what he's capable of doing. To me, they've got the hardest job out of a lot of the teams, purely because I don't think Abhishek Sharma is going to accept a retention below 14 crore. And, because he'll be picked up for 14 crore plus at any other franchise or most other franchises. So they've got to somehow find a way to get their most influential players in Cummins and Head, in my view, they're the two, along with Abhishek Sharma, and still have the flexibility of right to match. But who's gonna take that 11 crore slot?
Well, I think
Klaassen?
I think Travis Head would be getting double than what he was paid last time at 11, almost double.
But you look at the year he's had, Ronak.
If I was to say to you, Travis Head's in the auction, 9 other franchises are having a crack at him, what do you reckon he'll go for?
15 plus.
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes complete sense because they've got 3. I think Cummins is the captain. They have to keep faith with and build the team around. You don't want to risk losing Cummins, and you want your option strategy actually for Cummins to be involved in that strategy. So you want to nail him down. So I would think Cummins, Abhishek, Travis Head, and Klaassen. This is the one franchise that can afford to spend. It'll end up being, I think,
61.
18, 14, 11, 18.
61.
Yeah. So you'll spend 61 crore and you'll go into the auction with whatever the balance is.
59.
Or they use the Nera method and offer the top 2 guys the same amount regardless of what is cut.
But you're anyway going to have 2 guys at 18. So that's going to happen anyway.
Yeah. So
I think if Nitish is uncapped, that's a sure shot at 4 as well.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Uncapped,
That I will. Yeah, if
he agrees.
It's also unlikely, given that he has made the Bangladesh T20 squad. But what I do want to ask here is, Tom, while we think of these players and their values, you'd imagine we're thinking high figures. But traditionally, mega auctions haven't seen those kind of bumper figures. I mean, the last mega auction actually saw the record for the highest mega auction bid, and that was 15 crore for Ishan Kishan. So typically, you don't see such big amount shelled out at big auctions because teams don't have the capacity to do so. So do you keep that in consideration?
It is a consideration, but I think this right to match is going to change that a little bit, because I think some teams will release players with the hope that they could get them back with the right to match. And let's stick with Abhishek Sharma, because he's obviously the team that we're talking about at the moment. If he went into the main auction, you can guarantee that he would get, you would think, at least a bid 14, 15 plus. And you would make room in your budget if you were landed with a player of that caliber. Unless you got your opening position nailed down, you don't need an opener. I quite like the idea of potentially retaining Cummins, Klaasen, Abhishek Sharma, and Travis Head, all of them, which I think amounts to 61 crore.
Yes.
And just giving them 15 each.
Yeah.
And there's obviously 1 crore left over, which you can, divvy up, but maybe give that to the captain. But sit them all down, have the discussion, and just say, we're going to give you all a share of 61 crore because we want all of you to be part of our program going forward.
Yeah, I think what we might end up seeing from Sunrisers, KKR, and we'll come to them in Mumbai, is they might just go in with their first 10 players who will probably be part of their 11. There might be around 80 to 90 crore spend on them, and maybe 20 to 30 crore spend on the entire squad, the rest of the squad. And that might not be the worst way to attempt a big auction. You can always build on your holes in the trades and in the following years. But do you see that possibly, Tom, is wise for at least these franchises where you can see there's a problem of plenty? Instead of leaving them to the fate of the big auction where anything can happen, you secure them, and even if you go in with a slightly less purse for these teams, or at least Sunrisers here, it may not be a bad idea.
Well, the value of experience and proven performers in the IPL is just absolutely paramount. And to gamble on a talented player or an emerging player or a player that has been around but hasn't quite cracked it in another franchise is a gamble. So I don't think you should leave it to chance. You should try to nail down your assets and then, work around the budget that you've got to build the squad around those key assets.
Okay. One quick one on that, looking at that list we've put up. So we're all, I think, saying that they'll manage to get everyone to agree to this, whatever the numbers may be. But between Klaasen, Head, Cummins, and Abhishek, you got 4 lock-ins. Some big names not in that, though. One is Bhuvaneshwar Kumar. Another is T. Natarajan. Wanindu Hasaranga, who is an option to retain. Even though we missed him last year, he's one of the most sought-after spinners. Any changes to that? We mentioned Nitish Reddy. If he's uncapped, he should certainly be part of that. Would you retain a Nitish Reddy even if he's not uncapped and you have to retain him at potentially 14?
I think that you'd get him for under 14 in my view.
Okay.
He's played 1 season of IPL, yet to really have his opportunity on the international stage. So to be a high risk for a player that is yet to prove himself over a period of time.
Okay, fair enough. And the impact player is going to stay, so that perhaps puts in perspective the all-rounders price as well. Any other names from that Sunrisers? Natarajan, Bhuvi, Hasaranga? No, we're happy with that.
That's right to match.
Yeah,
I think some of these names will be right to match. Like
you can only right to match one of them because 4 cap players are featured there. So you'll only be able to use the RTM for one.
Bhuvaneshwar is a good example of a
No,
player
but
who
you can use.
benefited from what Tom was saying. If they had actually reduced this number of years from 5 to 3, I mean, Bhuvi is not part of the Indian team now. It's kind of unfair that he's treated differently from Dhoni. I know he's been part of the team more recently, but he's not part of the Indian setup. So why should he not be in the uncapped category?
Yeah, I think Ishan Sharma is going to fall into that category soon as well. So you'll have a few names there. Just confirming that you can only retain 5 capped players.
Yeah.
Counting your retentions and your RTMs, right? So if you've got 4 capped players there, you can only use 1 RTM.
One, yeah.
And the other one has to be for an uncapped player, if at all.
Correct, yeah. So that's why I'm saying if Reddy remains uncapped, he can still be used as an RTM in the auction.
Yeah.
They want it.
I don't think there's anything like a franchise-based niggle that'll keep you uncapped for just another couple of weeks. But we shall find out.
I mean, we were discussing those fast bowlers. 2 of them are linked to the last few teams that the Indian coach worked for. So you might be getting some calls.
Gautam is going to get some calls on Mayank Yadav and Harshit Rana. Can you just cap them for the next one, not this one? Let's move on, shall we? That's SRH for you. Please send us your thoughts as well. If you're watching on our YouTube live, I'm keeping an eye on those comments. Here we go then. CSK. Let's put
this. Uncapped. Let's go. Dhoni first.
Dhoni at 4 crore locks the uncapped.
Jadeja, Gaikwad.
Now, Jadeja, Ruturaj, Gaikwad, Shivam Dubey are sort of the standout names there, but Gaikwad.
Patirana, but I think Dubey and Patirana are teams for me.
Ooh, okay. Let's get Tom's view on this. So, are you saying that Ruturaj Gaikwad at 18 crore, your captain at 18 crore, or Jadeja as the number one retainee? How would that work? Now retired in T20 as, of course, Ravindra Jadeja.
Yeah, I would look at this squad and think 3 Indian retentions. Gaikwad, Jadeja, and Dubey would be the 3 I'd lock in. If MS Dhoni was happy to come in as an uncapped in that four crow category, I'd jump a million miles and say thank you. And I would then.
Sorry, Tom, you put it so nicely and politely. Imagine after all this, if Dhoni says no, I don't want 4 crore, I'm going into.
What if he says I'm not coming? I'm not playing.
And then I'd leave myself in a strong position with plenty of crores in my purse to be able to right to match Patirana for sure. And probably Tikshana is one that I'd consider as well, particularly given the home venue where he's so destructive.
Okay,
And
so Gaikwad,
Conway has
Jadeja,
been another
Dhoni.
huge player for CSK. Like Devon Conway, I don't think he'll be in the initial retentions, but certainly someone who'll be looked at with for a right to match card.
It's important here to also point out that you don't need to exhaust your RTMs only. You can just buy back players. For guys like Devon Conway and a lot of other players that we've just seen, you could simply just buy them back and keep your core, like we've seen with a lot of teams in past auctions. The RTM is when you feel like that's something that works with your budgets and whatnot. But I think guys like Tikshana and Devon Conway, they may very well just buy them back.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think some teams will also, like CSK, will keep a purse available to look at someone like Ben Stokes. This is where I feel that because they have bought him already once, right? They were the last team he played for.
Yes, and he barely played that year. That the year that he got his play.
Yeah, and they would clearly, with the way Dhoni is happening, they would want a senior player like Stokes in them ranks, and that's where I feel that maybe the RTM will come handy here and not go overboard with full retentions with CSK, I feel.
Yeah, actually, I had one question about Jadeja, Tom. Do you think he's a definite at 18 or 14? Because he, as Ronak said, he's now retired from T20 internationals. His strike rate over the past couple of seasons has been not the highest considering where he bats. Of course, an all-rounder, so very valuable. Is he somebody who you would think maybe I can let him go into the auction, or are you sure that he would? Because I don't think he'd accept anything less than 14. So are you saying that you would lock him down for a minimum of 14 crores?
If you threw Jadeja out into the auction, he'd comfortably get 14 crore.
Yeah.
He's still incredibly fit. He's a proven winner, and you could argue at times he hasn't been used as effectively as he should have been with bat and hand. With the ball, we know he's a game changer. So I wouldn't let him go for sure.
Yeah, and I think the 10-team auction, just again, it's caused so much more of uncertainty. Yeah. All you need is 2 franchises to desperately want Jadeja. We know MI's had a lot of love for him for many, many years. Gujarat Titans would look at him as a local player as well. So I think even at this stage, Jadeja would certainly be a 14 crore player. That's my take as well.
Yeah.
I don't think
none of us. Sorry.
I was just going to say the only thing that would change your view on whether it's Jadeja or anyone else in this category is there a like-for-like player in the market that you feel that you could get that's in a different stage of their career that you're going to get, maybe, at the age of 25 or, 28 against sort of being at the, a mature age player.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked that is because I don't see another bowler like Patirana in the market. I think he's just such an exceptional bowler at the death. Somebody who can bowl 6 Yorkers at that pace every over. I think that he's somebody who, if you let him go into the auction, would go at a big price.
Yeah, but where will he come? I think it all depends on where he comes. And he will come on the first day, you would think. And he would come... If he comes in the first fast bowler set, then people will have money. Yes, he is, I think, still in the 10-12 crore bracket probably, but not...
or we go back to what the logic was for Sunrisers, where CSK, if you're giving Gaikwad 18, Jadeja 14, Dubey 11, if you want Patirana, that's another 18. Now, are you gambling that you'll get him for somewhere there, even if the auction goes high? You should still get Patirana back for less than that number. And the point Dustin was making is whether you can gamble the same with Jadeja. I think Jadeja is likely to get more interest than a Matisha Patirana. The only other question also here is whether there's case for another uncapped player here. Tushar Deshpande perhaps as someone who's...
But then that means 18 full. What is it? 16?
It's only another
It's only four.
But then you're left with just one RTM. That's the issue.
Yeah.
But the thing is, in 51 crore,
there's
5 players. No, we already have 4. We have the 3 plus
we have
1
4.
uncapped. And then you use the second uncapped on Tushar Deshpande, which actually feels hand in hand with what CSK tend to do. They do like keeping as much of their core as possible. And in that case, if you add a Deshpande to this, that's 51 crore spent for 5 players.
I'm just saying, Tom, let's try and read this. But I think if Deshpande goes into the auction, he's going to get a really good price here. Indian fast bowlers, I think, will be at a premium here. And at 4 crore, if you can retain him.
Yeah, I'd absolutely retain him. He's been very important member of their squad, and he's one of those unsung heroes that Dhoni has sort of elevated, from nowhere to somewhere and been, in amongst the leading wicket takers. So if he's prepared to accept 4 crore, I would definitely lock him down.
Sorry, I'm being rightly pointed out that Deshpande is capped. And I can't believe
Zimbabwe.
I saw him play in Zimbabwe. I'm so sorry, and thank you for pointing that out on our YouTube live, Shivam and some of the others. Yeah, there you go. So
we all had a brain fade.
The 10 international cap rules, a perfect example there.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. We need help. Thank you very much. All right. So Deshpande goes into the auction, and good luck to him. So we've got Gaikwad, Jadeja, Dubey, and Dhoni as our 4 lockdowns here. Right? Everyone happy with that? Let's go to the next one, shall we? Punjab. Now, this is a very interesting team where there's a case to be made perhaps having everyone go into the auction and use your RTMs. Maybe the odd uncapped retention.
The only question is Ashti for me.
Sorry, just before we move to Punjab, a few questions on whether Samir Rizvi as an uncapped player should be retained on CSK. If we quickly just have a point on that. He was paid good money last.
I was going to throw that name out there, but he hasn't played any cricket since the last IPL, so it's difficult to assess.
And that reduces your RTMs from 2 to 1.
Yeah.
And also the price will drop for him in a mega auction. It won't be the same as what he went for last year.
So you could just again buy him if you want to buy him back. Right. Let's move forward, shall we? Punjab Kings. I think Shashank Singh is a name that we're all talking about as, that Punjab would be well advised to just get him to agree. But I think Shashank Singh should reject it and go into the auction and have a real good payday.
No, I think, but there's something to be... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was just saying there's something to be said for kind of also sticking with a franchise that's given you a chance. So I wonder whether someone like Shashank Singh would consider that, Tom, that even though he could go maybe for more than 4 CR, does he want to stay at Punjab because that's a team that's given him a chance? He knows he will get in the 11th there. Is that something he'll consider?
Oh, it'd be definitely something that he would consider, but I'm sure he'd be advised to probably go into the auction because, he's a player that, as Ronak quite rightly said a couple of minutes ago, with 10 franchises now, players like this, you get 2 or 3 teams that suddenly think, wow, the way that he can finish games for you, he's a perfect fit at number 6 for us. So, you can double 4. You'd think he'd get 8 if he went into the main auction.
So I was discussing this with a franchise and this exact name. And does anyone remember 2021 mega auction when the lists were they mixed when they came out, the player sets, uncapped and capped?
What do you mean by mixed?
In the sense like
you did have a set of
the order
players which came before the later capped sets.
Okay. Yeah, because Shashank will be part of, you would expect the top uncapped list. So I say that because the money available to franchises will obviously influence them to bid how much they bid. I still feel he is in the 6 crore category. I don't think anyone is going to break the bank for him. So
Interesting.
either, yeah, so you would think like it's between 4 and 6, and then it's left to the player if like the relationship he's built with
But the
Punjab and he wants to.
Indian middle order finisher is a rare thing, and someone who's proven it at least, who's at least had one good season. It's only the one good season or the one breakthrough season, and therefore it's an interesting one. But okay, let's leave Shashank out there. Anyone else in that? Now they don't have Shikhar Dhawan, is obviously retired. Sam Curran we think might be a captaincy option, but is he worth retaining at 18 to then build around? I think that's a question. There aren't a
And
lot
Ricky
of
Ponting.
players screaming here for retention other than Arshdeep Singh, and there's of course Rabada.
And Jitesh
Right.
Sharma.
Jitesh Sharma.
Jitesh at 14, 11,
and
18.
and a resurgent Liam Livingston, who's been good for them and is now really having his best year
Yeah.
in international cricket. And the question I have is, while none of them scream out as 18 crore options, I want to throw what you guys discussed for Sunrisers. Is there a case to pick three of these players, which is a total pool of 43, 18, 14, 11, and then split those figures between them? I mean, you shell out 43 for these three players, and maybe no one's worth 18, but you can balance it out as a 15, 15, 13 between a Karan, Arshdeep, Livingston. Is that something you'd consider?
My personal, when I look at this squad, my personal take on it would be I would put everyone in the auction, except for two uncapped players, and that would be Shashank if he accepted, and Harpreet Brar.
Yeah,
if he
that's a good one. There's a lot
So
of questions
they're
on
the two-
Harpreet Brar. Yeah.
They're the two that I'd lock in at 4 crore, and then the rest I would gamble to get into the auction. And if Arshdeep goes above 18, well, okay, I'm happy to pay whatever it is to supplement, to get him back. But the others, whether it be Rabada, Sam Curran, Jitesh, I'm sure I'll be able to get cheaper by doing it through the right to match in the auction, or just buy them in the auction against retaining them at the prices that are set out.
Yeah, there's also Ashutosh Sharma has pointed out here. So there are quite a few.
And
Prabsimran
Simran.
So there are quite a few nice, but you can only retain a max of 2 uncapped. So just pointing that out. And the player also has the final call. He can say no and go into the auction. So there are those two things you got to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'm with Tom on that. 2 uncapped, and the skill sets they have are good, and then the rest of the guys are not ever going to go for.
Let's talk Arshdeep Singh here. I'm very keen to talk Arshdeep Singh and whether he is a player at this point who's actually worth your sole retention at 18.
So this is the thing that, as we were discussing with CSK, you'll have, say, somebody like a Pathirana maybe going into the auction. It's likely someone like a Mitch Stark might be in the auction. I think there'll be quite a few marquee fast bowlers in the auction. So then that changes your valuation of your star fast bowler, right? Because you know that he's not one of a kind. Maybe there are other marquee fast bowlers in the auction, which means other teams might be going for them. Like a KKR might be focused on getting Stark back. And so you could get Arshdeep for less than 18. As Tom said, you can kind of write it off that in the case that he goes for more than that amount, you are still willing to pay it.
Yeah, let's also point out the new head coach, of course, and Ricky Ponting may or may not want to name a captain before the auction. So perhaps the importance of retaining a Sam Curran is not like it is for Pat Cummins and SRH. So there's that aspect to put down as well. Maybe he has different plans. Kagiso Rabada is the other one, world-class bowler, but is he worth 18, 14? So I guess we're all in agreement here that Shashank Singh and possibly Harpreet Brar. If one of them rejects, you also have Ashutosh or Prabsimran as options. But 2 uncapped retainees at 8 crore and go into the auction with 112 crore and as many as 4 RTMs. Tom will be back in a second, but I think that's what we're going with, guys.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, Tom, you go with that. 2 uncapped, 8 crore, 112 crore, big advantage.
That makes perfect sense to me. You've got a new coach, a high-profile coach. He'll want to put his own stamp on this team, and I'm sure you'll be able to get your combination of players back that you want out of the existing squad underneath the budget of what would be if you retain them.
And I think Punjab did that already once in 2017 when they retained only one guy, Akshar
Yeah,
Patel.
they had only Akshar. Yeah.
Akshar 12 crore or something, I feel. So they
Yeah, and I
know
think at that
they
time,
usually go into auction with big
2014,
purse. So
yes.
yeah, Arshdeep
yeah,
and
I don't
Jitesh
see
for the
them.
longest time were uncapped. So
Yeah,
there's
I think
that.
they will go with a big purse again. So yeah, this works. Two uncapped.
All right, two uncapped then, and perhaps the biggest purse going into the auction. Right, that'll be fun for a keep on thing. Let's go to our next one, shall we?
That's
Gujarat Titans. Good options here. Shubman Gill, Rashid Khan, David Miller, Mohammad Shami. So you got some big players over here. Shami, of course, has been out of action for a long time. Whether that affects his price, we shall find out. But right, let's go for it. I think Shubman Gill is pretty obvious. You're building your
Yeah.
team and your brand around him as
And
captain.
Rashid.
I think
And
Shubman
Rashid.
and Rashid are sure shots.
Shubman and
Yeah.
Rashid are sure shots. And the rest RTMs, I feel. Miller.
I mean,
Mohammad
Shami
Shami
is
as
the
well.
one question.
No.
If he's available for 11 crores, Tom, I mean, I know there's questions about fitness, age, but considering it's the 11 crore bracket, would you go with someone like Shami or just wait to see what happens in the auction?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because it's been a long time since he's been back. Ideally, you want to keep him. Would he get more than 11 crore if he was in the auction? I would probably think yes. I'd be inclined to retain, those three, Shubman Gill, Rashid Khan and Mohammad Shami at 11 if he accepted 11.
There's a nice one coming through, and I thought of this name. Rahul Tewatia remains uncapped.
I was going to
Yeah.
say, yeah.
I think he will.
And Shah Rukh Khan as well. But
this is a team which can use two uncapped because Tewatia and Shah Rukh. And
Or they have others
there's
also.
Abhinav Manohar as well.
Hey,
Yeah, I mean, the
does
minute-
Mohit Sharma fit into the uncapped category now?
with the new rule,
Yeah.
does.
let's find out.
Good question.
He does.
I don't remember when Mohit played last.
Mohit Sharma's last game for India was in the year 2015.
Yeah, so clearly he fits in there. So he's
Yeah,
there,
he-
and then hey, what about that Robin Mins guy who had unfortunately didn't play? Did he play ever? He's another uncapped guy.
You just
He just played US
transcended. You've gone back to just being a Zoom call, Nagraj. You just
Sorry.
That's
I-
fine.
But I think you have to.
I'm going to a little bit of a curveball here. I'm going to go with Shubman Gill, Rashid Khan, and Syed Sadashian as my three retain.
Oh yeah.
wow.
Purely because I think in the auction I'm going to get Shami cheaper in the auction than I'm going to get Syed Sadashian.
Ooh, all right. That means 18,
Yeah, and also-
14, 11 for the
That's
top
43.
three. And if Tewatia agrees, or if Shah Rukh Khan agrees,
And-
then one of those two has a retention.
I think
as
there are
an
more,
uncapped.
but there might be more Indian top order batters in the auction than experienced fast bowlers. So that's the only sort of question between Shami and Sai Sudarshan. Which one of them will have more competition in the auction? But yeah,
Well,
I
I
can
think
see what Tom is saying as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
he's a 10-year player for Gujarat Titans.
Yeah.
And he's a proven IPL performer at a very
Yeah.
young age.
Yeah.
And he's a left
And also which and what stands for me against Shami is that the obvious points about fitness, age. We don't know how long his career will last. Probably considering his injuries, his ankle, etc., keeps coming back. Recurring injury he has had for the past few years. The other bit is next year India are playing 5 Test series in England, and they would want him with the World Test Championship final. Also a probability. So they want Shami the Test bowler. So his focus is going to be that on the workload. So I don't think spending 11 crores on him teams will think twice. So yeah, Sai Sudarshan is a better bet. So
Interesting. But is Sai worth 11? There was a question earlier which says is Shubman Gill worth 18? I think we're all in agreement that that's a lockdown, isn't it, Tom? Shubman Gill at 18. Doesn't matter.
100%.
Yep.
and also you're looking at,
And
as
you
Tom
could
is
well
saying,
make
you're
it
future
16.
proofing. You're having you actually, the GT would be doing themselves a favor by having a young player for next 2 cycles.
Yeah.
And investing in that person, and they have invested, and that's also a franchise where players likes the environment created by Nehra, whatever they seem to like some of them, so they might, like Tewatia is one of them.
Yeah.
he might
I mean,
not get the
Tewatia is an
money.
interesting one. Whether Tewatia would agree at a pay cut to stay at the franchise, or whether he would go in and potentially look to have. I still think he'll be valuable. Whether he'll get more than four, I don't think he'll get what he was last year on, but he can certainly get more than four. So I guess that's the other one.
He's the impact player, right?
Sorry?
He's simply the impact player now. He doesn't bowl. I'm saying Tivatia is
Yeah.
more looked as an impact player. So
The
And
other
there's
one
David
I
Miller.
just mentioned.
And how many RTMs do you want when you go in? If you retain Tewatia as well, you'll only have you'll have two.
2 RDs.
Yeah,
Two.
yeah. So David Miller is someone you really want back. You would think you might want to use the RTM for David Miller. There's
Noor
Noor,
Ahmad is
Noor Ahmed is another guy. Yeah.
Absolutely, Noor Ahmed.
Those two, yeah.
All right, that is Gujarat Titans for you. Shall we move to the next one? So we've all agreed Shubman, Rashid, and Sai Sudarshan, and Shami goes into the auction. Would be smart play and use the RTM potentially for him. Looking at the price.
And you try to get Tawatia at 4 crore.
At 4.
Okra.
Yeah.
And you could even probably go Shahrukh Khan at 4 crore as well, and close the door on, your top order Indian talent, knowing that you've got a clear plan going into the auction to what you require.
But I think that might be a difficult one because Shahrukh has wanted to go in the auction when he was with Punjab, exactly similar situation. So he will not agree to.
Maybe he
both
likes
those players-
he likes
both
this
those
franchise
players-
more. Yeah.
Unless he really has.
Well, you'd try to negotiate.
Yeah,
and get him over the
definitely. Yeah.
line.
Right.
You could argue that he's been grossly overpaid for the last few years too in most franchises.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, there you have it. Shubman, Rashid, Sai Sudarshan, and smart play could be for Shami to go into the auction and be matched, and Tewatia to be retained as an uncapped player. Let's go for the next one, shall we? Mumbai Indians. Okay.
Fun begins.
Enjoy yourselves, everybody. Hardik Pandya at 18. Let's put that down first, shall we?
Can we?
My, we're already there, are we? Or shall we put? And I'll put the second one at Bumrah at 18 because you're going to definitely have those two.
What about
locked down.
Surya and Rohit?
In my list, I actually I saw them not retaining Rohit Sharma. I see Rohit Sharma becoming the headline maker of the auction.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with that. I think the way that things panned out in the last edition of the IPL, he would be, I think a little bit disillusioned with what's happened over the last 6 to 12 months. But in saying, you said Hardik at 18 and Bumrah at 18, I'd have Bumrah and Surya Kumar Yadav at 18 and Hardik at 14.
So that means Hardik leaves again. Sorry.
And then
Well, that's up to him, but all you can put it down to is performance, form, and fitness, and all those. When you dissect all of those areas with Hardik Pandya, does he deserve to be an 18 crore player? And who, if you've got an 18 crore player, he's got to be a genuine match winner and do it regularly. And Hardik, through his trials and tribulations over the last edition of the IPL, was struggling with both the fitness and also the performance.
And Tom, I'm guessing you've gone for Tilak as your 11 crore player then, Tilak Verma?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Nagraj, in this case, we come to whether they can move around with the numbers. You can't go less, but can you go more? Where if this comes down to impressions and making a statement and players needing to be paid a certain amount or at least be shown to pay a certain amount, can Mumbai be in a situation where they retain Surya, Bumrah and Hardik all at 18 and then one player at 11, where you're still coming through to the amount, you're paying guys more, so you're going to get that cut. But in terms of optics, whether this is possible, because MI is the only franchise where I see it becoming potentially an issue.
But then in that case, Hardik will be the fourth player.
Correct. I don't think this comes down to numbers as much as the number of retention.
I think
the price.
And personally, I feel that as much as logically, I guess we all agree is Rohit goes into the auction and MI use the RTM card for that, I suspect they will risk it and go with that 75 crores and retain every one of them.
So you're
And
saying
then,
Surya, Bumrah, Hardik, Rohit all retained, and
unless there is whatever the speculation is about a couple of those names that they are very unhappy in that sense, and they would rather kind of renegotiate, and if they don't get go to the auction, then everything changes. But let's not go into that discussion right now. But I feel that they might risk this 75 crores and then
I mean, but
75.
the other thing to consider, and a lot of people are putting this in the comments as well, is that Mumbai has been built on their uncapped young players, and there are a lot of uncapped players who they can consider. Like there's Nehal Vadhera, there's Namandhir, there's Akash Madwal. All three of those guys, to be honest, are players who I think you would look at
yeah,
as
but
uncapped
We're
options.
also saying here Piyush
definitely
Chawla qualifies as an
Piyush
uncapped
Chawla,
player,
yeah.
but
But
I
I
don't
think
think, I
Yeah.
don't
I mean,
think
not
that
Piyush, but
top
like
the line back.
but players like Nehal Vadera and Namandhir, there aren't that many finishers of that type in Indian cricket. And Akash Madwal is a fast bowler who had a difficult season last year, but clearly has
yeah.
potential.
I think this, so. Before we move forward on this, let's ask Nagaraj what he knows here.
No,
Are
don't
they
ask me all that.
likely? Are they likely to retain Rohit and Surya? There's talks of Surya also wanting to captain. He's the T20I captain now. Is there any likelihood that these big four names would be short retentions in a lot of places, that we may not see all of them retained at MI?
That's a possibility.
It is
That
possible.
remains on. It is possible still. While my MI have always believed in retaining the core, which is why I said they would, if these guys agree to that, somehow they manage to satisfy whatever their some is to an extent and then
It
retain
is
them.
manage the situation there. Yeah,
Yeah,
manage the.
but in the past, like going back to Dustin's point, I agree with that. And Mumbai have always been good at scouting some nice talent, young talent, uncapped talent, but they've also been very good at releasing them. So, like you see the Mohsen Khans and etc., who go and perform at other franchises. So, firstly, I
You know
don't
what?
know. Yeah,
I'm gonna just put that in context, Tom. You can. I think in the last 2 or 3 auctions, that's changed. I think they've not had the most impressive auctions. I think they were fixated on a lot of players that they brought back at way more than the price. Ishan Kishan at 15 plus. Jofra Archer's gamble didn't really work when you knew he was not going to be available for a full season. So I think they've this is an opportunity for Mumbai to almost go back to what worked for them. And I'm curious, Tom, whether retaining a lot of these big players, looking at the 3 year cycle, whether that would be in Mumbai's interest, or whether just Hardik convince Bumrah, and maybe you can look at Tilak Verma and some of the other players you mentioned, maybe even in Ishan Kishan. But if that means you send Rohit and Surya Kumar Yadav into the auction, so be it.
Yeah, I look at. They have had their difficulties in the auction at the auction table the last couple of years. They've sort of got caught up being sort of in a way too loyal in some cases, and try to retain players or get players back into their squad from the auction, which has cost them dearly. And both examples was Ishan Kishan and Jofra Archer, both come at a heavy price. Did they get the return they require? I look at Ishan Kishan and I think, look, he's a terrific player. He's very exciting, but also runs very hot and cold. How many games does he actually win off his own bat? Yeah. That's the question you got to ask, and if you're paying him, up around 14 crore for a retention, are you going to get that return on a performance point of view, regardless of the fact that he's been in a Mumbai shirt for the last 5 or 6 years? So, they may need to make some hard decisions around that. But if they can retain, Hardik, Bumrah, Surya Kumar Yadav and Tilak Verma, in my view, that's a good four to retain. How you sort out the finances is, whether you, average it out and help, sort of all go in at the same level. And then look at maybe Rohit Sharma, depending on what his intentions are, as a right to match in the auction. You don't know what those conversations are going to be.
So Hardik, Bumrah, Surya and Tilak Verma, the 4 lock-ins here. Anyone going for Mumbai to just fill up the whole complement over there? And between the players that we have mentioned, there's also a Tim David there. There's the chance to retain either Vadera or Namandhir as your uncapped.
I would go with two uncapped. Yeah, I would probably go with Namandhir and Akash Madwal as my two uncapped. I think Namandhir, I'm just going off the eye test, but he looks a player who could be one for the future, and he's an all-rounder. He bowls off spin as well. And Akash Madwal is just an Indian fast bowler who can bowl at the depth, which you don't get for less than 4 crores in the auction anyway.
Yeah, I like that. I like that option.
And that would still mean retaining a decent amount, because that's what 61. That's 69 crore.
No, but that also means you're done with your RTMs. If you cover 4
RTMs,
Indian players, so Surya, Bumrah, Hardik, 4 players done, 2 uncapped done, which means you go into it with just your balance purse.
Which also means Rohit Sharma is done.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, unless you buy him back.
You can buy him back.
Buy him back. Yeah. Rohit Sharma, Ishan Kishan, both names that if they want to retain that core, they pay whatever it costs them. I don't see them exhausting their RTMs. I don't think that that's something they'll do. So I don't know if any team would want to do that. So I think they'll all go in with at least that one, just in case there's a player they could get back. But I think the Rohit one's a big one. But I foresee Rohit just going into the auction. I think it just makes more sense from even MI's point of view. If you want to buy him back, buy him back. But I'd like to see what the value of Rohit Sharma is in the 3-year cycle coming up.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people will jump at him because a lot of teams need captains.
Yes, absolutely.
And he's one of the best, when it comes to captaincy. We all know what he's capable of doing with the bat, so you could build a team around Rohit Sharma for sure.
3 teams I can name probably. I can think of.
And 2 new head coaches with whom he can have some sort of...
Yes, yeah.
And he's of course played with, he's been part of Ricky Ponting dugouts before with MI. Yeah. So he has that familiarity quotient. So I'm sure there are others as well that I can't think of now. But yeah, there you go. Okay, so we do not have Rohit Sharma on our retentions. That'll be very interesting. And I can't wait to see how those talks develop with Suryakumar Yadav and Jasprit Bumrah. And whether there is any change. It's still firm that Hardik Pandya will captain this side, Nagaraj, from whatever you can gather? Or is nothing set in stone?
Yeah, I feel last year was a very different kind of a year. They made that, if we have to trust what the rumor or whatever it is about Hardik demanding captaincy and am I going for that, so they have to live with it now. They can't change the captain after 1 year.
And one would think that with the World Cup and things like that, it'll be a better time for Hardik Pandya to return as captain. But then again, we also know what's happening with the Indian team.
But it's more about the captaincy. It's more about the captaincy, whether the captaincy is working or not. That is the review that we don't know yet. If that is not working, then Surya is your better choice, and that's for the guys to consider that. So,
well, if you look back on last season, there was a number of tactical errors. That played out. So, they'll have to think long and hard around that captaincy, because the captaincy piece in any IPL squad is a critical one.
Yeah. And on that note, I think you wouldn't want to retain a player with the stipulation that they have to be captain. I don't think Mumbai Indians will make that mistake. I mean, even if you're going
to have some tough conversations here.
I mean, even if you had Hardik as a captain next season, you can't tie yourself down and say he will be our captain for the next 3 seasons, because if it doesn't work for another season, you have to change.
But actually, and change that now. Change that now. Don't change that next year.
You've also seen India's logic here, which Aditya Karkar had pointed out, that his fitness remains a concern about having to manage his workload. He's getting older, and therefore they went in a different direction. So there's nothing that stops MI from thinking that way. But with everything they've invested with him and bringing him, who knows?
So that's both Surya and Bumrah or whoever they want to chat to. They should chat to Hardik, and that would be
our best guess here is that Hardik is certainly going to be retained, and they can't. It'll look, last year will look so much worse if they release Hardik as captain or release him into the auction. I just think that's not going to happen with MI. The key is who else will go in, and I think it looks like consensus is Rohit Sharma might. Right, that'll be fun. It's not going to be easy. We're just giving you what we think. You can tell us what you think, and this is nowhere near what might actually happen. Let's go to our next theme, shall we? Rajasthan Royals, very interesting team this. Of course, Samson, we think, is someone that they're going to retain. Josh Butler is one of the best players in the world. Jaiswal, Riyan Parag, lots of good Indian players, and you got the likes of Chahal, Bolt, Ashwin. So this is an interesting team.
Yeah, I'll just throw in the early uncapped shout here, which is, I mean, of course, Riyan Parag is now not uncapped, but this is a team which can avail the capped uncapped benefit via Sandeep Sharma. Sandeep Sharma last played in 2015.
But 4 crore for Sandeep Sharma, you might actually get him for cheaper in the auction.
I agree. Or you might get a
I
similar.
doubt. I think he might go for 4 crores.
Somehow franchises have not been big fans of Sandeep Sharma. Whether that changes or not, we don't know. But at 4 crore, there are going to be a lot of names.
But Tom
in that.
was the head coach, right? He was with Sunrisers.
Yeah. Sandeep, he values him very highly. But anyway, let's go to the ones that are nailed down. Is Samson a nail down at 18? Simple.
Yeah, for sure. I think. Yeah.
Josh Butler, Tom.
Yeah, I think Samson, Butler, Jaswal, and Parag. If you can somehow lock them away, that then gives you a very, very good core.
But then you're paying 2 of them 18, Tom. So which 2 would go at 18 on your list?
This is a team that I'd look to try to average out, because I think Jaswal is also someone that's will command quite a big sum, particularly if he went into the auction. You can guarantee he'll get 18. So I think you need to somehow work some sort of compromise with the group and just say, look, we're retaining 3 of you. We all feel that you're of the same value, and we're going to give you the average if you're happy with that.
No, so that's Samson, Butler, and Jaiswal. But Parag also then, are any of these players worth releasing to the auction and using the RTM? Could Josh Butler come for less than 14? Could Riyan Parag come for less than 14? Or do you lock them down?
I wouldn't rule out Butler going to the auction. I wouldn't rule that out. In fact, I wouldn't rule out if a Butler is not part of their original list. When I heard that first time, I was really surprised. I'm not saying this has come from the franchise, but when I heard this kind of a thinking, some of us were talking about it, and I was like, Butler is a no-brainer, but people were saying that no. I mean, maybe he might want to go to the auction. Maybe there's the other guys, Jaiswal. Jaiswal, I think, will agree to whatever price, 14 or 11, because it's the franchise that has helped him. He has a very good bond with the franchise right from a young age, 19. I think 2019 onwards he's been with them, and now with Dravid coming, he will look for that as a head coach. That also plays a big role in him wanting to stay with the franchise. So I would think, but what's his name, Jaiswal as number 2.
So you're saying Samson, Jaiswal, and Parag are likely are the 3 retentions.
Parag, I don't know whether could be, but Parag can go into the auction and you can have
Parag's stocks are only rising. He's at his best season.
And I think Parag at 11 definitely seems like a good bargain at 11 crores. But then the question is, so this is the question I had for Tom, which is, if say you have Parag at 11 and then you're going to split 50 between the other 3, that means you're giving the other 3 an average of about
17.
No, but we're not.
And is Josh Butler 17 crores in the auction?
Yeah, good question. There's a lot of wicketkeeper batters in the international circuit. Now, the only reason they'll keep Butler at that price is because of the brand Butler, and Rajasthan is a big brand, and the sentiment and the history that they share together. If you're looking at it purely with a business head, you'd probably put him back into the auction, and you'd have a set amount you're prepared to bring him back, knowing that if that doesn't work out for you, you've got other players like Phil Salt and players of that caliber in the market that are wicketkeeper batters at the top of the order that are not equally as devastating, but not far off.
Right. And any other names in that? Lots of questions on Chahal, on Trent Bolt, whether these are any of these players you'd rather just lock in and keep, or are you just going to go with your
I think Chahal is the one. Chahal will be part of my list.
I don't know but at 11 crores, Naga, I don't think wrist spinners reach that amount.
No, as RTM.
Oh, yeah, I mean, sure. As an
RTM. I think I see RR as a team going with 3 cap players and then retaining the RTMs for auction.
So Samson, Jaiswal and Parag likely to be retained. Everyone else fair game at the RTMs depending on
unless
the price.
you want Sandeep Sharma as another like an uncapped name if they want.
Yeah, I think as Tom said, Butler is the big question.
Charmer as an uncapped.
I'm also, I think someone like Dhruv Jurel, I really hope he goes into the auction because he deserves a good payday and a good franchise. And keeper batters, Indian keeper batters are going to be, I think, sought after. Other than that, Avesh Khan was a big money player for them. Prasidh Krishna, big money player for them. But I think they'll all just end up in the auction.
Yeah.
Ashwin in the auction as well, and still valuable RTM potentially. Tom, Ashwin.
I think so. He's proving to perform against time, isn't he? He's only getting better and better with his consistency. He'd be one that I'd look at in the auction, depending on price.
Question on Shimron Hetmeyer as well. Would you be more interested in Shimron Hetmeyer as an RTM ahead of a Joss Butler? We're actually not sold on Joss Butler, I think. Or are we? What's the consensus here? That Rajasthan may actually not retain Joss Butler and send him into the auction. Is that what we feel?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I'd be inclined to put him back into the auction with the view of taking him back, but have a backup plan of 2 or 3 overseas wicketkeeper batters that fill his role.
Yeah. Should things go out of hand with the bidding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think
and
that's
also
fair.
I'm coming around to that thought now.
Yeah, because you've got 18, 14, 11. So you got 43. You'll have a nice big purse to go into the auction with.
So
if you just put in those 3.
Yeah. They have some really good players. Butler, Chahal, Ashwin, Jurel.
Trent Bolt.
Yeah.
See, they could also, if they're looking for a keeper, they could bring Jurel back as their wicketkeeper.
They already have
Samson.
They already have Samson usually.
Oh, Samson, of course. Yeah.
So we don't need. That's the reason they wouldn't look at keeper.
I think it looks like Jaiswal, Samson, and Parag are their big core over here, and they would likely retain them. They're almost guaranteed to be 6, 7, 8, maybe 10-year players in Jaiswal's case and Parag's case as well. So there you have it. That's a big one for you. We don't think Josh Butler is going to be retained here. He might go into the auction, and they might bring him back on the RTM with some backups. Right, let's go to the next one, shall we? We're almost done, I think. We've got a couple of franchises more. LSG. KL Rahul, Nicholas Puran scream on that list, of course. And big question on Mayank Yadav, who's just been called up to the Indian side for the Bangladesh series. So he may not be an uncapped player by the time the deadline kicks in. You also have Ravi Bishnoi, you have Marcus Stoinis as players there. So let's start making that list. Tom, KL Rahul and Puran?
Well, yeah, if they're wanting to be retained, we know there's been some controversial sort of articles around KL Rahul and the relationship with the franchise to whether that's been resolved or not. If it is resolved, for sure, KL Rahul, captain, top order batter, Nicholas Puran, the most dangerous overseas middle order batter in the game at the moment, in my view. And Stoinis had a terrific year for him. So those 3 I would have thought are absolute certainty. Bishnoi is another one that I just wonder whether you could write to match him in the auction. I don't think you need to be throwing 11 crore or whatever the number is that you retain him for, where I think you could possibly buy him back in the auction or write to match him.
Yeah,
I find it interesting that no wrist spinner seems to command that 12, 15 crore type price like batters do or like all-rounders do. And they've ended up being there aren't too many good ones. We've seen how many sort of old wrist spinners have to come back in and every team wants one. I'm just thinking whether this is the auction, Tom, where someone like a Bishnoi, it's worth keeping him at 11? Or do you sense even at this auction, you will not have wrist spinners going at that high prices?
Well, the problem with this situation for Lucknow is that he's the 4th player if you do retain him. So then for that 4th player kicks in the 18 crore.
No, sorry. Who are your other 3? You have Rahul, Puran and Stoinis.
Stoinis.
Okay.
So if otherwise you look to buy Stoinis back in the auction and you keep Bishnoi at 11. So that's your decision, in my view, is obviously the first 2, KL Rahul and Nicholas Puran, are a no-brainer. Stoinis and Bishnoi, one of those two I would retain, and the other one I'd be picking up in the auction.
I feel
Ayush
like
Badoni's name is being brought up here as an uncapped.
I feel like LSG are a team who can't possibly go for 4 capped players to retain, because even if Mayank Yadav gets a cap, they still have so many viable uncapped options. You look at Mohsin Khan. He's someone who's highly rated.
Yeah.
Yash Thakur has been successful for them.
Absolutely.
So you've got,
Badoni.
if Mayank is there, you've
Badoni is there.
Badoni.
You have
and Badoni. So
Arshad Khan's good player.
you have a good case for 2 uncapped players and you pick any of these 2 players who we've just named. If you manage to keep them at 8 crore, I think that's worth. And then you still want to have 1 RTM with you. So then that leaves you with 3 retained.
I can actually just see LSG retaining just 1 capped player. I can see them maybe going just Puran at 18. Again, this depends on the whole relationship between Rahul and the franchise. But let's assume Rahul wants to move on. They could just go Puran at 18, maybe get a couple of uncapped players, and then leave themselves with lots of money to try and get back people like Stoinis, Bishnoi in the auction.
I'll go with that. I definitely will. Yeah, Puran.
So you're saying KL Rahul will go into the auction?
I mean,
I think there is talk anyway about it. There is talk.
I don't have information, but I'm just saying, in the case that he wants to go, if he wants to leave, then I can see them going with just Puran.
My take on Rahul is the uncertainty of the big auction and where he'll land up. He will continue this year, and then when the trades are activated, he may look for a move in the following year. That's how I see it.
But it's also not up to Rahul. I feel that it's also the main question. This is again the question that like MI face is, do LSG want Rahul as a captain? I feel, this is not like some inside news. I feel that they will have to consider this question because last year they had that. I think they could look at even Puran as a captain. He's a good choice probably as a keeper batter, but whether then they want another keeper.
They did well under him last season, under Puran, when Rahul didn't play, and Puran's won a couple of franchise tournaments.
So I would go with Dustin, Puran, 1 retention and 2 uncapped players in Mohsin and Badoni. Because Badoni they like
everyone
very
else,
much.
Bishnoi and Stoinis.
So that's
and
18 plus,
even Mayank Yadav. Yeah, you go in.
Mayank Yadav, if he was capped, then Mayank Yadav could pay Badoni probably, because Mohsin is a very good bowler. He's not like I think he will deserve some. He will get easily 7-8 crores probably if he comes into the auction.
The questions on Naveen ul Haq as well. I think a lot of these players are likely to either be bought back by the franchise for continuity, even if they don't use the RTM. But do you see that as something that could happen? We could have KL Rahul going into the auction as well, Tom, and Puran as captain. Is that a smart play?
Well, put it this way: if I was LSG, I'd be doing my best to keep KL Rahul and Nicholas Puran. But if relationships are fractured, that's the time to move on and not look back. And Nicholas Puran, yes, he can captain and keep wicket as well, obviously. And we all know what he's capable of doing in the middle order. So if they did go if KL Rahul, those discussions went that way with regards to, he doesn't want to be retained, the smart play would be just retain Puran and a couple of uncapped players and go into the auction with a big purse and get back who you want out of your squad.
Okay, there you go. All right, there you have it from us as far as LSG go. Let's go to our next. I think we've only got 1 or 2 left.
One?
We've got DC and KKR, I think.
DC and KKR. Delhi.
Okay,
Up next. We'll go to the champions last. This is also a very interesting franchise when you make the list down. Rishabh Pant, Akshar Patel, Kuldeep Yadav, Jake Fraser-McGurk's name came up, but now looking at the price, I think we're all going to have to look at that. And remember, a lot of the players that didn't feature last year. There's Harry Brook. There's that's something. Prithvi Shaw likely to perhaps be released. So, and Tristan Stubbs, what a terrific season he had. So let's go into it. Who's our first pick here? Pant, obviously.
Yep.
And imagine
Akshar as well. Would you retain Kuldeep at 11 over the same logic we used? That wrist spinners don't command that big a price. Leave him open for an RTM. Kuldeep Yadav.
The thing is that you can probably go for just one of Kuldeep, Fraser-McGurk, and Stubbs, right? Because if Pant and Akshar are your first 2, then at your 11 crore price, you can only go for one of those 3. And I don't know if somebody like Stubbs had an incredible season, so I don't know if he pips Kuldeep to that spot.
This is where, Tom, is it can we reconsider the whole balancing the purse situation and get Fraser McGurk into the equation? That fine, of course, it's not worth an 18, you'd imagine, but you pick your 3 plus Fraser McGurk and then spread that 61 among those 4.
I would be retaining Stubbs ahead of Fraser McGurk if I had the choice of that overseas position. I think the 3 Indian players, Pant, Axar and Kuldeep, absolutely retain those 3. But if I'm going for a 4th player, forgetting that is an 18 crore purse, because you would, again, you'd sort of shuffle the finances to make it a little bit sort of more fairer for Kuldeep, for instance, at 11 crore. I would be going with Tristan Stubbs, because I think the role of a finisher and a power hitter is the supply of them against your top order power hitters. There's an imbalance. There's many overseas top order batters that can open the batting and impact the game through the power play, but there's not as many that can finish an innings and have the impact like a Tristan Stubbs did last season.
So on that, Tom, you're okay with Kuldeep at 11, retain
at
a minimum of 11, and not send him for an RTM because wrist spinners might be cheaper.
Well, Kuldeep, I'd sort of put Kuldeep in the bracket of Rashid Khan. They're match winners. He's actually won. When he came back into that side, they started to win. I think he was unfit for the first portion of the season. He came back into the side. He also had an impact with the ball, and they started to win. Fraser McGurk obviously came into the side as well and had an impact at the top. But I just think the value of the wrist spin of Kuldeep and the value of Tristan Stubbs is, far outweighs the option of Fraser McGurk, who I potentially could get as a right to match, or just buy him out of the auction if I'm really wanting to get him.
So 61 crore is worth spending for Pant, Axar, Kuldeep and Stubbs. And then
I think you can make the case that Axar is worth 18, just the same as Pant with what he's done for Delhi recently. So those 2 could be your 18 crore players. And then you'd probably have Kuldeep at 14 and Stubbs at 11.
It doesn't sound outrageous. It doesn't sound outrageous at all.
Or you give Pant, Kuldeep and Stubbs 12.5 each. You balance the 14 and 11.
Fair enough, if that is indeed an option. A lot of questions on Porel as an uncapped pick. Not a bad option at all. Abhishek Porel for 4 crore.
Yeah, definitely.
I actually like Rasik Dar as an uncapped option also. Had a decent season with the ball for Delhi last year in the death.
But one name, Harry Brook. Also, from the point of view of, that's again we don't know who the coach is. That's the first thing DC have to appoint or announce.
Naga, I think Stubbs has massively outperformed Brook in the IPL, so I don't see there being a question of.
No, but
before we wrap this up, we'll also talk about these new rules that have come in to keep a lot of the overseas players honest about their commitment to the IPL. So I think we'll come to that. Harry Brook, and with England players, that their summer is going to always start right after the IPL. There's always going to be the player availability and management issue. So I think there's that. Yeah. So I think this is fair. We all agree that Pant, Axar, Kuldeep and Stubbs, and you could have Abhishek Porel as one of your uncapped players.
So does that have an RTM, right? They're left with 1 RTM.
Yeah, anyway, you can only use 5 cap players. So if you have to have an uncapped player, you might as well keep Porel in your team. It's certainly a viable option.
Yeah.
There you have it. All right. And now the defending champions, I think, are the only ones remaining. Let's go KKR. Now, is Shreyas Iyer, I got a lot of these questions coming through. Is Shreyas Iyer worth retaining at 18 crore was a lot of what a lot of people were asking. Or do you send Shreyas into the auction and RTM him and just keep Sunil Narayan, who you think at the back of last year's season is an absolute lock-in?
Yeah, going back to the point of RTMs, and KKR and MI are the teams who asked for maximum RTMs. So they already knew that this was, they envisaged this would be a scenario they will have to confront. But there's more than, Shreyas, Dre, Narayan, Shreyas, Rinku, Varun Chakravarti,
absolutely.
Rana.
Mitchell
they have
Stark.
like some Mitchell Stark. They have like virtually 7 to 8 players, and out of that to pick is damn difficult and manage the purse. So
There are
I
some
don't
questions
know.
on our YouTube live. We can just, from what we've gathered, Shreyas Iyer does not qualify as an uncapped player. So please don't calculate that for him. And Sunil Narayan also is not an uncapped player. It's only for the Indian players, that rule. So even though Narayan hasn't played for the West Indies in an age, it doesn't matter. Shall we lock Narayan as a retainee, especially after what happened last year, Tom?
I think it's hard to not lock in both the West Indians, Russell and Narayan. Suresh Iyer is an interesting one at 18 crore. I think if he went into the auction, I think you'd have at least two teams, I would have thought, that are going to have a big enough purse to be able to think, no, we want to move the needle here. We want him. They've dropped the ball with regards to letting him into the auction. We're going to secure that player because we're prepared to pay 18 or more to get him in our shed.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Now, 11, like if you take Narayan Russell at 18, 14, in whichever order, is Shreyas your man at number 11? And now, do you retain Rinku Singh? Do you retain Varun Chakravarti, Venki Iyer, Phil Salt, Mitchell Stark? So many good names.
Yeah, this one is the hardest probably, I think. But I think on the subject of Shreyas, branding wise as well, as Tom mentioned, you've already lost. I mean, you just won the IPL and you've lost Gambhir. You don't want to lose another person from the think tank that won you that IPL. So that's why I think Shreyas will be retained at maybe 14 if he agrees to that.
And
then,
also, like, Indian captains are hard to come by. So so
That's-
that is a big factor, and that's why they will retain Shreyas. And it's impossible that I can't think of anybody else that.
But without opening up that fourth player at the 18 crore slot, if you have Narayan and Russell locked, and you want one more retention, what's more valuable, Shreyas Iyer with his captaincy or Rinku Singh with that rare skill set as an Indian finisher?
Shreyas Iyer.
This is just a genuine question. What do you think Rinku Singh would command at the auction? So let's say they put him in their RTM calculation, but Rinku Singh, very interesting player right now. What do you think Rinku Singh would go for? Tom, any guess? Your best guess?
I'd say 14.
Which means he becomes a retention then. It makes more sense to actually retain
I
him.
just think he is, as Yash said, he's got a rare skill set. Again, a left-hander down in the middle order is so valuable. He seems like he's a terrific team player. He had a pretty quiet season last year in a successful team. We all know what he's capable of doing, so I'd be pretty reluctant to let him go.
But I would use the RTM hence, right? You could use the RTM then. You would save that money and keep it, because not many franchises really will have that kind of a money, I think, by the time Riku comes out. Even if it's the third set what set will he come out? Specialist batter 2 probably.
I think the better question is, Ronak, and to the panel, is what would Russell and Narayan get if they were put in the auction?
Would theirs be very dependent on where they come within the set? Because we've seen that make a difference as well, right?
I think this is a very interesting one. It almost takes us back to the Rajasthan Royals thinking of, let's keep our Indian core. Let's have Jaiswal, Parag and Samson locked in and send Butler into the auction, Bolt into the auction. Can KKR potentially keep Shreyas Iyer, Rinku Singh, maybe Varun Chakravarti, and say we'll RTM our 2 West Indians?
I think the 2 West Indians are too valuable because they're all-rounders. And like a Rinku, ultimately, he is high value, but he is a pure batter. When you compare him to a Russell or a Narayan, they're giving you something with both bat and ball.
Also,
and Narayan, the season that he had last year.
Yeah. Also, Shreyas and Varun together for 43, what would be 43 crore, right? Yeah, that feels a bit much.
Yeah, and I mean, what I would do is I would consider, and this is a maybe left field pick, but someone like a Ramandeep Singh as an uncapped player at 4 crores fulfills your Rinku role to a certain extent. Also bowls, gun fielder. So, in case you don't end up getting Rinku back, depending on how much he goes for in the auction, at least you have an Indian finisher there.
I think Ankush Raghuvanshi is also a good name for a retention potentially.
Yeah, in fact, this is one of those teams that stands out as a 2 uncapped player candidate, because you guys have mentioned Raghuvanshi and Ramandeep. There's Harshit Rana, even if he does get capped, there's Webb Aroda.
Yeah, but I don't see them going to one cap because you're going to have that RTM for the amount of international players you have. Phil Salt could be someone you want back desperately. Venki Iyer, Nitish Rana. There are so many names. Chakravarti. So I think this, you could see why KKR, Nagaraj knows this. KKR and MI and maybe SRH wanted as many retentions, but
Tom's question, just to answer his question, it's interesting that KKR themselves valued Narayan. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not looking at any numbers. Was it 6 crores? He was the last player retained in 21. So they themselves put him at 6 crores then. Now the auction numbers are saying the least, if you retain the top 3, you're getting 11. That's the least number. You put Narayan in the auction, he comes up as an all-rounder. Obviously, in the first set, when people have a lot of money, you would think you would get around 10 crores for Narayan.
I think much more than that, Naga. He's probably, I mean, he's
no minimum. I'm just saying much more, but minimum. Hence, I'm saying then that Narayan goes as the third retention at 11 crores. You understand the logic I'm trying to build?
I do think there's a slight gamble involved there, because if you look at the all-rounder sets, it's not just about it being all-rounder 1. Where you come within all-rounder 1 tends to make a difference. Last time around, Dwayne Bravo was the first all-rounder to come. Just after having won the IPL with CSK in 2021, he went for 4 crore. And the all-rounders that came later on, that does tend to happen. The Hasaranga came later on in all-rounder 1, and that was, 10.75 crore.
No, but then once you know Narayan is part of that, then you would strategize it, right?
And I just think with the history that they've backed these guys when they were bigger question marks than they are today. And last year was a big season for both. Russell's back at the peak of his powers, Narayan as well. So looking at the logic of the franchise, when there was a case for them to not have retained them, they did. So now I think that's...
But the amount has changed immensely, right? At the point when they backed them, when they were down, it was for a sum total of 18 crore. Now you're talking a sum total of 30 crore.
So they went into back in the auction.
Yeah, I just don't see that happening. Tom, would you possibly think of it?
I agree with what you're saying, Ronak. I can't see it happening, but I think this panel is sort of debating what we would do, and I think take the emotion out of it. The best business decision would be to retain the captain, retain Rinku, and retain one of Russell or Narayan in that third spot, and then do your best to get that Russell or Narayan, whichever one you don't retain, out of the auction so you get your full complement. Because I think the fourth player, this is another example of the fourth player costing a fortune to retain, to get your balance of the players you want to keep. And I think you could get Russell or Narayan for less than 18 crore in the auction.
Very interesting. Very interesting. This I actually think you might just get Shreyas Iyer for cheaper. I'm sort of, it's a punt, but also we know Dwayne Bravo's.
No, but then you don't.
To me,
that Dwayne Bravo's joined there, so that might even increase the chances of a Narayan and Russell being part of the plan and retained.
Yeah, but you can still pick them out of the auction.
And we haven't even discussed Mitch Stark, by the way. I'm guessing he's not even a consideration for a retention. Probably somebody you'd use the RTM on, Tom, or just try to buy back depending on how much he goes for.
Yeah, I think you look at what price he's coming in at. You're certainly going to get him cheaper than what you paid for him last year.
Yeah. And I think you're also a little wary. In Australia, we'll be playing 5 tests down under. There'll be the Champions Trophy just before the IPL. IPL's a long tournament. And if anything, while Stark was outstanding in the playoffs, they also got a bit of an assessment that, you can, I think it put into context when he returned to the IPL, how much the game's become hard for all bowlers, including the great Mitch Stark. So maybe there's a case to just leave him in the auction and you can play around with who that fast bowler is. If it's not Stark, it can be.
And I think there'll be plenty of options.
Yeah.
And it's a name that we will bring up when we have that chat on the overseas players, because players have to make themselves available for auction, and Stark, as we know, has ensured that he needs to stay fit. He has set his priorities, and he said that my priorities are with Australia and he came.
Yeah, I mean,
for-
I wouldn't be
so
surprised
far,
if Stark
he won't
doesn't,
come.
if
If
doesn't
he doesn't
send
turn
his
up.
name
Yeah.
in. Yeah, I wouldn't be
Because
surprised.
next year is Ashes, and he'll keep that in mind for sure to stay fit for that. So
Interesting. So
You know,
are we in
you
agreement
might-
then that? Yes, Tom. Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. Just with Stark, is that when his position comes up, you're more than likely going to have a huge number of bowlers of Nokia, Rabada, Trent Bolt. You can go through a list. I reckon you get a dozen fast bowlers of international of high quality that could easily fill those shoes. May not have the impact that he had in the finals, which was quite extraordinary, but still very, very fine bowlers.
Yeah, agreed. Naveen Ulak, Matisha Patirana, Josh Hazelwood. You could have a lot of bowlers. Jofra Archer might
Jofra Archer
return.
going to be around. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of names. Fair enough. All right. So are we in agreement? Narayan, Russell, Shreyas Iyer, and Rinku, with perhaps Ramandeep as the uncapped retention?
I think we had kind of said it's Narayan / Rinku. One of those two only will be retained.
Wow. Okay. That's
I
going
think
to be
that's
tough.
the conclusion that we had all sort of come to, right?
I think they'll go all out. I think we saw their strategy as well. They ended up breaking a lot of money on just their core group of players. So I don't think the money will be a deterrent for KKR. I think they will keep their 5 intact. They might even go in with no RTMs for all you know, and just play
no,
around
but
with
then that's why I feel that they also have someone like Varun Chakravarti who's a match winner.
Yeah.
So they want the strategy they have to be clear about it. If they go with this kind of a strategy, they have only one RTM left.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you choose to not use.
They would want
the
they
player.
would want a few more RTMs, and just
So maybe you don't pick the uncapped. You let that be and go ahead with these 4: Russell, Narayan, Rinku, and Shreyas. Which
No, but you still have only one RTM, Yash, because you
But
can't
or you change it up
yes.
completely. If you're so unsure, you change it up completely and you just retain Sunil Narayan or just retain and keep your one main player, even if it's Shreyas Iyer, and everyone else goes into the auction. Big purse, play around with the RTMs.
best would be Dre, Shreyas, and Rinku, and keep Narayan in the auction. And
I
use
think we
3
can
RTMs.
safely say this is the one franchise that has possibly the most difficult decision.
Yeah. I think it's really hard. And I think when in doubt, you should just lock your players in and manage the auction on how it goes. These 5 or 6 guys that they retain, 4 or 5 guys that's going to, I think that's going to be their core. So I think you ignore the money then in that sense. All right. So tough as it was, we've tried our best to put this together. I think that's a wrap of all our teams. You can see it's hard and it's going to take a lot longer for these franchises to figure it out. Now, before we wind things up, let's just talk about this rule about the overseas players. One, that they have to sign up for the big auction. They can't, otherwise they won't be able to play in the to sign up for the mini auctions. 2, that there is a cap now on how much money an overseas player can make in both the big and the small auctions. You can read Nagaraj's piece on the ESPNcricinfo articles to get more on that. And I think there was one more, and the ban that a player will face should he sign up and pull out. So this is quite significant. It's the first time we're seeing something like this. Thoughts, Tom, on whether this is a good thing?
Yeah, I think it's a very good thing. I think we've seen for too long players come in at a mini auction, get a huge payday purely because of supply and demand forces at that particular year. And you've got the likes of Jasper Bumrah and others that are getting paid well underneath what they're getting paid. And I just don't, that doesn't sit well with me. If you're committed to the tournament, you should be committed through thick and thin. Yes, if you're injured or there is some health issue, that's absolutely fine. That's unavoidable. But you're either in or you're not.
Any other takes? Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just say that I think though what it needs to be accompanied with is allowing players to set whatever base price they then want. Because the issue is sometimes a player sets a base price of say 2 crores, but they've kind of decided in their head that if they don't get say 5 crores, it's not worth their time to come to the IPL. So what might help is just let them set whatever base price they want. And if they don't get it, then they're not picked anyway. But if they get it, then they are going to come for that amount.
I don't think that's a bad option at all. Like you put them down.
No, but the thing is, that freedom is dead for the overseas player. The slabs are set. The maximum.
You can't go
No, but
beyond
you can't
2.
set it at 5 crores, right? You have a max of 2
No,
crores.
no. So the reserve price slabs are set in advance, and 2 crore is the maximum. The overseas
Yeah.
player usually sets it for around 2 crore mark.
No, I'm
Most of
saying
the
let them
marquee
go
names.
higher than 2 crores, Naga. Because I
Justin's
think
point
the
is,
issue is
if you're going to cap their amount they can make, then at least give them the flexibility to come in only for a price that they're happy with, and that price may want to be more than 2 crore.
But then the market is not determining the price.
Can I? The only issue with that, Dustin, is you don't want to go that particular year, so you set your base price at a high level, knowing that that's going to put a lot of people off picking you up in that first year. And then when the supply and demand is at its peak in the second or third year, you come in for your payday.
yeah, got you. Yeah, that is a loophole, right?
Yeah. All right.
And
there
also,
we have
what
it.
is not clear is, I think, which is what we'll figure out, and questions will be asked by players themselves, is like there would be under 19 players. In fact, Matt Roller sent me this query he got from somebody, and about what if I'm playing under 19 and I'm not yet qualified to, and I don't enter my name? Does that mean that I can't come for the next year's mini auction? So people have those kind of questions also lined up. So there are some gray areas in the rules that IPL has put out yesterday. So we need to still check on that, including the uncapped player bits we were talking about. So
Yeah, interesting. All right. I think they'll in time we'll find out that this might just be for internationally capped players. They might just clarify
Yeah.
that this
yeah,
particular rule is for internationally capped players, and that's as long as you just send in your name, then you may not make the final cut or not. But I think that'll pretty much cover everyone. So I see this is a pretty easy fix. Right. This was 2 hours of us trying to get back into IPL mode. Gentlemen, thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate it. The sun is set in Perth, and we tried to get the very best out of you, but always a pleasure hearing your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. And big thank you to Naga.
Good to see you all.
Cheers, guys. And we will be continuing our coverage on the IPL, especially with the deadline. Nagra, just remind us again, the franchises will have to release their retentions by tentatively.
not tentatively, definitively October 31st, 5 p.m.
October 31st, 5
IST.
p.m. Then it will all be revealed, and we'll be back for another 2 hours of why this has happened. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts, and for being part of the conversation. And keep those coming in, and we will be back very soon again on ESPN Cricinfo. This wraps our very special coverage with the IPL rules being announced.